All right. So, a couple minutes late again because I had to restart my computer because I keep forgetting that my computer will not connect to the internet unless I restart it because I fixed that problem. Anyway, we are here for a special lesson on can. Pretty sure that's what we're talking about today. I did some initial research, as I told you guys before. We're going to do some of the research live, so you can kind of see how I go through this. So it's a deep dive into can and could and related stuff. Taylor's here, welcome. Pretty good today. I'm Ganeshali's here, welcome. So we'll wait till a couple people get in here, but I'm tired. Just have sleep in my eye. Yesterday was crazy. Akif is here, welcome. Yeah, sorry we had to move this from yesterday to today. Like I had the live, and I told you guys I'll see you tomorrow, and then like literally 30 minutes later, plans changed. So I didn't know about it until almost the last minute. And I said it was a family issue, but it wasn't anything major or bad or whatever. It's just I have some relatives that are down visiting, and this on my dad's side is my dad and one of my aunts, one of my uncles, and my dad. I thought he was leaving on the 6th, but I guess he's actually leaving today or this morning, and he's up staying with one of my other aunts who lives here because they live in different places. And so if I wanted to see him, I was planning to go like today or tomorrow to see him, but then he's like, oh yeah, I'm leaving tomorrow, which is today. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I have to go up there. And my aunt lives like an hour away from here. And then obviously like I want to spend time up there. So I had to kind of like clear my schedule at the last minute and all this stuff to be able to do that because my dad lives in Washington. One of my aunts that came down lives up in Washington, around Washington. And then there's an uncle I have who I have not seen since I was 10 years old. Been almost 25 years. He lives in Wisconsin. And for the first time, I got to see him because he was down visiting as well. So that was crazy. It was awesome. We hung out, and it was a pretty good day, but it was kind of exhausting. And so here we are. So that was nice. But anyway, it's one of the good things about having my own schedule. You know, I can kind of move things around if they need to be moved. But okay, we got some people in here looking pretty good. Feel free to say hi if you're lurking in the shadows, like maybe Delio's here lurking like he always does. I don't know if Abdullah's here, but so we're going to be doing, I did a little bit of research, Adam online. And we're also going to open the dictionary, dictionary.com. Okay. Open up a few tabs here. So why would you do that? Oh, okay. Could. Oops, that's what I want. So we're looking at can and could, and there's a couple connections with them we're going to explore. It's unfortunately, so far I haven't seen a whole lot of can, and whatever. It's not like some of the prepositions. It actually seems fairly simple, but we're gonna see some things. So I'm gonna share my screen here. Feel free to ask questions at any point. I may or may not see your comments since I'm going to be sharing my screen. But let's see. Let's do entire screen. Let's do this one, I guess. Sure. Let me see. Okay. Wow, that looks crazy. So you should be able to see my screen here, hopefully. Yeah. Okay. It just echoes all the way back. I guess when I go over to check the chat now, it's going to be all weird. Let me change this one. I'm going to make this into a window over here. And then I'm going to move this one over here so that way we don't get that. And then I'm going to share that window instead. Nice having two monitors. Yeah, we can see it. Okay, good. Why are you crying if you can see it? To be honest, are, can, and could different. Yes, people, that is grammatically correct because he's asking about can and could. Quotations around can and could would help make that a little more readable, but it is grammatically correct. To be honest, are can and could different in British English, for example? I can't say for sure. As far as I know, they're used the same. There might be maybe some slight differences, but I don't think I've heard a British use that was confusing to me. But I'm not an expert on British English, so I can only state my observations. Okay, so if we look at, we have etymology online, we have a couple of dictionary tabs open. We're going to be also looking at able. Now we're going to see some of the connections under the surface. We're going to try to get to sort of an essence of can, if we can. But it seems like it might not be the easiest thing. So there's also one important note. So there's can like as a noun, or this noun being used as a verb to can something. Just because this is spelled the same, it's pronounced the same, this is a completely different, unrelated word. This is like a soda can, right? A small cylindrical sheet metal vessel, blah, blah, blah. Not at all related to can. So one important thing when you're trying to look for like the essence of something, or dig under the surface and see connections between things, you got to make sure that, anything that might seem similar, it just so happens to be, the two words in modern English happened to be spelled the same and pronounced the same, but they're not at all related. Like we can see from Old English, kana, right? And then can comes from Old English, kunan. Completely different root. Okay, so don't be confused by that. So we're focusing on can as in, the modal verb. I forgot to type C. That's why I'm crying. Oh, okay. Oh, got it. So, yeah, we can it. Yeah, I understand. So, if we look at can, we talked before about like the meanings of can and could, and we'll, probably try to touch on that again because that's obviously relevant and important. But if we look at the etymology first, so from Old English, first and third person singular, present indicative, blah, 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 technical terms, right? You don't necessarily have to know this information, but it comes from Old English, kunan, which means to know. That's interesting, right? Because when we think of can, when we think of what does can mean, what does could mean, we don't think of know. We don't think of knowledge. But that's actually, turns out it's going to be important. Less commonly, in Old English, it was used as an auxiliary, as a helping verb, meaning have power or be able. Okay. So the modern use of can, at its core, underneath, there is still this idea, I think, seems to me based on some other things I've found so far in the research. But the main use seems to be this idea of power or ability. Notice there's have power, have, that's going to kind of be relevant. Of course, able, ability, that's relevant. Because we saw how there's can and be able is often interchangeable with can. Sometimes they're not. And we're going to see an example of that. This comes from the Proto-Germanic. So there's modern English, modern English, Middle English, Old English. Okay, if we go back through the evolution of English, and then before Old English, there was Proto-Germanic. So just like there's modern German, there's like Old German or High German, that also came from Proto-Germanic, right? So all the Germanic languages pretty much came from Proto-Germanic, and then Proto-Germanic, came from an older language, which would be Proto-Indo-European, which we're also going to see here as well. So Proto-Germanic, Kunyanan, something like that. Be mentally able or have learned. That's important. Okay, we're going to see why that's important. Mentally able or have learned. source also of Old Norse. So Norse is, I believe, it should be a different language family. But kenna, become acquainted, try. Old Frisian, kana, recognize, admit, know. German kennen, to know. Middle Dutch kennen, to know. Gothic. So you don't necessarily have to care about all of these, but it's kind of interesting to see maybe in different languages whether or not they're in the exact same family. How we can see these combinations. So if you speak one of these, like if you speak German, if you speak see Norse became, what is it? I think Norwegian, probably Swedish is in there. And then of course, ultimately before all those, Proto-Indo-European from the GNO, to know. Okay, and that's kind of important, but not as much. So we're getting sort of an idea of where this word comes from. Okay, or we're seeing some different ideas here. Have power, be able to know, be mentally able, have learned in Proto-Germanic. Okay, now interesting thing. So we have in modern English, we have to know and we have can, and they're generally used quite differently, right? If you say I know something, we're not saying I have the ability to do something. But in German, this sort of thing seems to have kind of been preserved in modern German because they have kennen, to know, but then they also have können, which is K-O with the diaresis or whatever, the two dots over it, and N-E-N. And können is can, right, to be able to. So ich kenne is I know, ich könne, or sorry, not ich könne, ich kann, it's irregular, so it's K-A-N-N, looks like can. Ich kann is I can. So that was kind of maintained in German, where in English it's, whoops, that's not what I wanted. In English, it's sort of branched off into two words that seem completely different. Okay, let's see what we got here. Happy 4th, yes, happy 4th, yay, fireworks. Okay, it is low the audio. Okay, good to know. I'll try to speak more into the mic. Maybe if I'm over this way, that'll be better. Fernando's here. Welcome, Ariel. What are the uses of can and could? So I talked about that in a previous live. We probably don't have time to go in depth into that, but we are going to talk about that and touch on that as well. We might have to do 2 parts of this depending on how much time we have. Everything is good for me. Good. The text on the screen is too small. Okay, I can make that bigger. I always forget about that because it looks fine to me. That's probably better. Okay. Now, if we move on from here, so now this was like the old English, the roots, right? All that. That's important and interesting information. Now we go here. So it holds now only the third sense of know, that of know how to do something. So even though we say can, right? We say I have the ability to do something, I can do something. Really what we're saying is I know how to do something, right? So know is still there, even though we don't think of know being related to can. We think of knowing, knowledge. There's almost a separate idea from can, and yet it's still kind of there. The root is still underneath, right? All the way back to kunnen, all the way back to what was it? Proto-Germanic kunyanen, be mentally able, have learned, right? If you're mentally able to do something, if you have learned to do something, you can do that thing. Now you might physically be incapable. Maybe you broke your leg, right, or something. So there's little subtleties, but generally speaking, if you know how to do something, you can do something. That's what it means. Knowledge is not skill, right? There are lines, but that's the core there. Now, important note. So know how to do something as opposed to know as a fact or be acquainted with something. And Spanish makes a distinction here too. So if you, of course, Spanish has poder, which is related to power. Interesting, right? We said have power to. Spanish is a Romance language, but English has also been influenced by French and Latin, which we're going to see in a minute with able. But Spanish has saber and conocer. When you say conocer, that's like I know someone, I know a city, right? So no conozco esa ciudad. I don't know that city. I'm not familiar with that city. Where saber is a different knowledge. I know a fact. So Spanish would be like poder saber, and then conocer. They actually have like 3 words. um, so different languages will have different evolutions, different lines. Also used in the sense of may, right? So we talked about that before. The sort of really like the lowest, more informal form of asking for permission. We had may, which sounds very formal, very polite. We have could, which is that neutral politeness. Could I, right? So may I go to my friend's house? Could I go to my friend's house? Can I go to my friend's house? And most English teachers will say that you shouldn't use can in this way because you're asking permission. You're not asking the ability to do something, but it is perfectly fine English. It's just informal. Um, so that's another use. An Old English preterite present, grammar terms, whatever. We don't have to care. Its original past participle couth. So we do have uncouth. We're not going to worry about that. That's tangential. That went off onto a different branch. We don't have to care. The present participle has spun off into like a cunning. Okay, so cunning, if someone is cunning, that's ultimately related to this kunan, but not particularly relevant to the essence of can. We don't have to care about that. So also part of this process is like, oh, this is related. This is tied to the same root, but it may not actually be relevant to this, word or this core idea in modern English. So that's another trap to fall into. You don't have to look at like every little thing. Now you could do digging, right? We could look at cunning and see, oh, okay, blah blah blah. But generally, it's probably not going to actually be relevant. Okay, so that's can in the etymology. So this gives us sort of an idea of what's going on under the surface, what's going on historically with the word, where it came from. We're getting some key ideas: know, have power, able, mentally able, learned, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Now we're going to come back to this, but first let's go to the dictionary because we're going to look at could. Actually, we're going to look at able. Could has a super short entry that doesn't actually give us information, but so can. Um, Auxiliary verb, auxiliary. We often just say auxiliary. We shorten it. Gives you different forms, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So to be able to, have the ability to, power, skill to. So we see this right in the definitions, right? Ability, power. She can solve the problem easily. To know how to. Okay. Ideally, you should already kind of know all of these meanings. If you don't, it's okay. You can learn them in the process. But like me as a native, like I would already know all these meanings. I would be using the dictionary to say, okay, there's this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, so I don't forget any. And then I can sort of see, okay, how do these tie under the surface? So to know how to, he can play chess, although he's not particularly good at it. So he knows how to play, but he's not good. There's a difference between knowing how to play and actually being good at it. All right. To have the power or means. So we see that again, right? So power, ability, knowledge, power. Okay. A dictator can impose his will on the people because he's a dictator. So he has the power to do that. He can force his will, what he wants to happen. To have the right qualifications. Okay, so this is one that we probably didn't see last time. He can change whatever he wishes in the script. So he's the writer of the script. He's the director of the movie, whatever. So he has the right. Right? He has the qualification. That's sort of a bit of a higher, more abstract use of can. It's still rooted in this power or ability idea, but it's sort of an extra context, right? So I would group this one with this one, right? And then this one would ultimately be grouped into this one. These are kind of like further spin-offs, right? And so part of this process, when I went through like the prepositions, because like one preposition might have 20 different entries, right? And so I said, okay, well, this one is sort of tied with this one, and I grouped them, and that's why in the preposition book you have different groups of things because they kind of go together. That way, it's not all spread out and chaotic. May have permission to, so it's right here in the dictionary. Can I speak to you for a moment? And yet your teacher says it's wrong, but it's right in the dictionary. To have the possibility, a coin can land on either side. This one, I think we didn't really talk about too much last time. Maybe with could, but I wasn't really thinking of the possibility idea. So this is another angle. Now, how is possibility related to knowledge or power or ability? We'll come back to that. All right, in fact, we can go up here to the dictionary. If my keyboard will work. Oh my God, that's not what I wanted. Okay, let's do it this way. Dictionary.com. Okay, what was it? Possibility. Possibility. Okay, so bam, there's possibility. We can also go over here, open possibility. See, so now that we found something that seems like, oh, this is interesting. Seems like a different idea. Well, we can go to the dictionary. We can go to the etymology. We can do some further digging, see if we can find any more connections. But we'll come back to that. Let's stick with can for a second. Okay, so blah blah blah. More. See, it says obsolete to know. So we don't really use it meaning to know directly. We use the verb to know. Okay, so but it used to have that root, right? We can find that in the dictionary. Can number 2 as a noun. Okay, so that one we don't care about. This is that noun being used as a verb. Again, we don't care about that. So the dictionary, again, it's going to give you maybe these other words that seem related, but they just happen to be spelled and pronounced the same. Okay, so none of that is relevant here. But that gives us our core of can. So it's actually in the dictionary. It's not too complicated. It lists 6 meanings. Of course, when we look at could, there's maybe going to be a bit more variety there. But let's go ahead and go to possibility, because now we have this offshoot of can. So let's not lose this, right? So possibility, what is a possibility? So as a noun, the state or fact of being possible. Okay, the possibility of error. So something that can happen. That's a natural way I would describe it. It can happen. Okay, possible, can happen. So they're already kind of, they seem sort of related because we can use possibility and can happen to describe the same thing. Something possible, he had exhausted every possibility. So that's possibility as a noun. If something is possible, see, I typed in the noun form, so it's not giving me the other one. You type in possible. My keyboard does not want to work. That, okay. I don't know why this is not working. It's bugging me. Possible. Okay, so that may or can be. Okay, may here is not permission. It's a possibility, because may can be used for permission or possibility. So that may or can be, exist, happen, be done, be used, etc. A disease with no possible cure. So it's incurable. Something that may be true or may be the case as something concerning which one has no knowledge to the contrary. It is possible that he has already gone. Okay, so I don't know if he's gone, if he left, but it is possible. Okay, so there's a possibility. It's like, I don't know. It could exist. It couldn't exist, depending on if we're doing positive or negative. Okay, so it's kind of more like existence, right? Happening is related to existence, kind of. Be done, be used. Okay, doesn't really seem related to can very much so far. We go to the etymology. Okay, possibility. So late 14th century, so that'd be the 1300s. State, fact, or condition of being possible, from Old French possibilité, and directly from Latin something, meaning a possible thing or substance, that which may take place or come into being. Okay, so we're seeing may a lot, may, can, this hypothetical, theoretical thing. Okay, if we go to possible as an adjective, that may be, capable of existing, capable, able, capable, occurring or being done, that can be done. So from Latin possibilis, I guess it's a verb or adjective, that can be done. Notice can, possible, can. Okay, from posse, be able. Okay, so now we're starting to see possible, right? If we think about that, this able is actually from able. And we already know able is kind of related. If I can do something, I am able to do it. So possible, even though possible doesn't really seem related, that I or that A turned to an I. And now we're starting to see more of a connection. Okay, so there's something going on here. As an adverb, by any existing power or means, power, interesting, existing power or means in a possible manner, possible way, perhaps, perchance, okay, that which may take place or come into being. Okay, So then the idea that I just got here is, well, what does this pos mean? Because if the able comes from able, what does the pos part mean? And that may not necessarily be very important, but what if we try to do this? May or may not find something. Okay, interesting. 1640s, Anglo-Latin shortening of posse comitatus, the force of the county, blah, 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 blah. Body of men, power, have power, be able. Interesting. Okay, so it actually sort of implies. So power in Spanish, poder. Posse. I don't know how I'm supposed to pronounce that. I've never heard this word pronounced, so I honestly have no idea how it's pronounced because that's English. Of the county, court palace, general sense of armed force, the modern slang meaning small gang. Oh yeah, posse. That's right. I wasn't even thinking of that word, posse. Of course, it's this is how we usually use the word today. It's a small gang, probably it's from Western movies. Okay, possess, to hold, occupy, inhabit. That's relevant. There's a connection with have under the surface, but we haven't seen that yet. Possession. Okay, possession, to have something. So there's a deeper connection to have. It's more indirect, but it is there. We're not going to probably be able to get into that, but because it's not directly relevant, but it is tied deep under the surface. To hold as property. Okay, so we can, you can keep going through these and saying like, okay, are we seeing similar ideas? So we're seeing holding a lot, owning. So this is kind of maybe more a little connected to have. And actually, if we look at able, I'll just go ahead and skip here really quick to able. Able comes from Old French, hable, right? From Latin, easily handled, apt. Verbal adjective of habere, to hold, okay? And if we actually look at, where was that? Because I saw one of these pages. Was it on this page? It's not showing it to me. What was I looking at? Oh yeah, so the Latin, I don't think it's on this page, but I remember it. Manage, yeah, because we're going to see manage as well. That's the other use of able. And if we look at Latin noun manus, in Spanish mano means hand. So hand, have is related to hold. Okay, able, we see connections with hold. Avere, that's really where have comes from. So we're seeing a lot of these interesting ideas, and we're kind of starting to see two different groups. We're seeing this sort of like having idea or possessing, owning, and then we're seeing this like ability, knowledge type thing. And ability is almost kind of like in between the two, right? Because if you have power to do something, you're able to do something. If you don't have power, you can't do it. If you know how to do something, then maybe you can do that thing. So there's this interesting complex under the surface that seems to have like two different big ideas, which would really be the root of have, the core essence of have, which I've looked at before and I have some idea of, but we'll explore that in a different lesson. And the core of can. So if we go deep enough under the surface, we actually start seeing these roots connect, and able seems to be the sort of the bridge between them as almost like a little sub root or system going on. So this is actually very complex. This is a very complex system, much more complex than any particular preposition that I found. And that's only because the only reason why we're looking at able is because we know that to be able to is commonly interchangeable with can, but sometimes it does mean something different, which we will also see. Let's take a look at the comments really quick. Hello, everyone. Chetan is here. I'm good. Hope you're good as well. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, chat going on. Very nice. What's going on? Yeah. Josh is explaining can and could to us. The essence of can and could. Can I borrow your book? I don't know. Can you? Yeah. I don't really call it a dad joke necessarily, but yeah, that's the traditional teacher thing. It's like, do you have the ability to, or are you asking permission? Which it's very annoying when teachers do that because they're giving you this supposedly correct English instead of, they're just ignoring the actual real English that people use every day. Has to do with I would call it teacher snootiness. If you don't know what snooty means, you can look it up. But anyway, so we saw can. That gives us a good idea of can. Okay, so we have key ideas, and this would be part of the research. So we have for can, we have power. We have no. No seems to be one of the real cores there. So we'll put no first. Power. What else did we say? So we have permission, possibility. What did we have? Be able. So we'll put able because that's related. Okay, and to know, we'll put specifically, because in modern English, we're going to say know how to do. Because it's not just general knowledge. We use the verb to know for knowledge things usually. And of course, if you say know how to do, that means, right, if you know how to do it, that doesn't necessarily mean you can do it, because knowledge is not skill. But usually, if you know how to do something, you can do it. Ideally, they go together. Okay, so we have know, how to do, power, able. So that's kind of what we're seeing for can. We could look at power, but we're probably not going to. We saw that idea of possible. Possible is related to, again, can be. So possible and can, possible and able, right? Able. We saw that those are related, so we can maybe throw possible on there, sort of like on the side, but possible related to power, related to ability. So it's kind of like a special expression of these ideas in a little bit of a different way. But as I said, when I say something can happen, something is possible. Can happen is possible. Okay, can be done, it is possible to do. Two different ways of saying the same thing. There might be a little subtlety there, but they I don't even really feel much of a difference in meaning. Context might make it a little different, but they're kind of two ways to say the same thing. And so we're starting to see these roots connect. Hopefully this is kind of clear. I know it's a lot. I know it's a little messy. But this is how my research goes. I'm like, oh, here's this. Let me look at that. Oh, okay. Let me come back to this. And I start to build a network of these ideas and started to see how things might be connected. So we'll leave those open for reference if we need them. But we can go to able before we get to could, because could gets a little messy. So we have able. We have able here in the etymology. Let's go to the dictionary first. Generally, I recommend looking at the dictionary first to get the different meanings and then looking at the etymology. But I just jumped into the etymology this morning when I was looking at it earlier. So adjective, okay, having necessary power, skill, resources, or qualifications. Okay, qualified. Qualified. So we're seeing this word qualify a couple times. We could probably look at that and see, it's probably in some way related to power or skill or whatever. We're not going to worry about that too much because we have limited time. But there's probably something connected there as well. So having power, we're seeing that again. Having unusual or superior intelligence, skill, etc. So an able leader. So this is sort of a special use. It doesn't just mean that he is able to lead. It means that he's really good at leading. So able can mean not just the basic meaning of ability. You have the ability to do something. Notice have the ability, have, hold, power, possess. Okay. Not that you have the ability to do something, but actually you're very able, right? You're capable. So just because you see able, it could actually have this sort of special extra meaning to it. That's sort of a special use. We don't usually use able as like that, but it's not formal. It's not uncommon necessarily. It's just maybe less common than the basic usage. Showing talent, skill, or knowledge, and able speech. That sounds a little weird to me. I wouldn't say that particular phrase, but apt. Okay. That's kind of related. Apt is sort of a fancy word, but legally empowered, qualified, or authorized. So this is in a legal context. We don't have to care too much about that. As a noun, usually able, a code word formally used in communications. Okay, so we don't have to care about that. See, you're going to find some dictionary definitions that aren't necessarily relevant. Able to, a suffix meaning. Okay, so if we add able, right? I keep clicking the wrong button. If we add able, so we have the base word able, but we can also use it as a compound, as a suffix to go at the end of words to change some of their. It's almost like changing the mode of the noun, sort of. So if we say, right, capable of, susceptible of, fit to, tending to, given to, depends on context, whatever, associated in meaning with the word able, occurring in loanwords from Latin, laudable, used in English as a highly productive suffix to form adjective, blah, 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 blah. So if we say, yeah, teachable, okay, so that's a good example. So to teach, that's a verb. If I want to make it into an adjective, right, this material is teachable. It can be taught to someone. Notice can be taught, teachable. They mean the same thing. Um, so it is possibility, it is possible to teach. So, okay, so we're seeing different phrases to be able to describe the same thing again. So these are obviously all related. Um, so this just adding able to it. Now you can't just necessarily do this with any word. Um, Sometimes we will do it with random words that don't exist in order to give it this ability idea, but it doesn't always work. Um, it's almost like a phrasal verb, how we can spontaneously create phrasal verbs, but that won't always work necessarily. So teachable, um, able to be taught. It's just different order. It's being attached to the word. It's modifying the word. Okay. Photographable. Okay, so something that can be photographed. So we might say a ghost, right, is not photographable, or a vampire. Vampires, they don't show up in mirrors or whatever, are not photographable. They won't show up in the picture that you take. Maybe you see them, but in the camera, there's no vampire. Okay, so we're taking photograph, which is a noun. Teach was a verb. Here it's a noun. Okay, and we're making both of these into adjectives by adding able. And giving it that special ability, using able as a suffix in order to add the ability idea onto that word. Okay, so this gets kind of more into word families, vocabulary learning. So that's a different topic, but we can see how able can be sort of extended into words instead of just its base use. Okay. So let's check the comments here. I was called snooty once by a Canadian. Interesting, because I was fact checking him on the usage of the word dude. Long story, but I was right. Probably is a bit snooty. But that's okay. Hi, how's it going? I just don't like snooty teachers. Like we would again. I don't want to use that term on stream because might get demonetized. But grammar police. We'll say police. I was thinking of a word related to World War II Germany. Grammar blank. But yeah, grammar police. A lot of teachers are stuck in like this is the proper English, this is the correct English, don't say this, don't say that, even though like everybody says it and it's just a part of normal speech. It's like, get over yourself. So sorry, other teachers who do that, but you should stop doing that. You should tell the students how things sound. Like if something sounds informal, I'm going to tell you it sounds informal. If something sounds, like, maybe you should be careful with this or careful with that. Like you should know, but to just all out say, oh, that's wrong, or that's, blah, blah, blah. There's like, oh, you can never put a preposition at the end of a sentence. That rule hasn't been followed for at least like 100 years. So like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly grammatically correct to put a preposition at the end of a sentence. And yet there are still teachers who teach that, especially non-native teachers, and there are still English learners who try to follow that rule, and then they find teachers like me who are like, yeah, no, you're just going to sound weird if you always try to do that because people don't speak that way. We put prepositions at the end all the time. Anyway, you don't know how to use can and could. Not too bad. What about you? So you guys are kind of talking amongst yourself pretty much. But he is displaying dictionary. Yes, I am. The thought police. Yeah. Well, it'd be grammar police. I mean, technically, I guess they are thought police in a way. Yeah, I'm just playing the dictionary because we're trying to find the essence of can, and we're seeing some connections to other ideas, other words under the surface. Particularly with can and able, right? We can't really talk about can without talking about able, because if I say I can swim, I am able to swim, there is a little different feeling, but they're pretty much the same thing and they can be used interchangeably. Okay. Can and able don't always match. That's where we're going to go to next. So if we talked about the dictionary here and we saw these uses, pretty simple. Okay. This is going to be the core one, the most important one. right? That we tend to use it. So having necessary power, skill, resources, qualification. Okay. So then if we go to etymology, shows us the history of words. Having sufficient power or means. Okay, so we see that idea from early 14th century, so that's 1300s, from Old French "hable." So whoops, I keep doing that. Yeah, that's probably fine. So we see that there's that H in the Old French, and we just removed the H, and we kept the rest. Okay, so this can kind of hide it from you because, like, if you're a Spanish or a French speaker and you don't see the H, maybe you don't even think it's related. If you're a French speaker, probably, but like Spanish, there's haber, which doesn't mean able, but it's historically related, um, right? Because there's here habere, to hold. So depending on the language, it may have formed off in different ways. But uh, able in English came from Old French, capable, fitting, suitable, agile, nimble. Okay, so these are kind of some different words, interesting words. We see capable, which we can look up, from Latin habilum, habilis, easily handled, apt. We see that word apt again, handled. Okay, so we talked a little bit how there's this have, hold, hand, handle. That's kind of going on in the under the surface with able, not with can, but with able. From Proto-Indo-European, that goes all the way back before Latin, before Old English, before Proto-Germanic. Proto-Indo-European covers like Proto-Germanic, which English ultimately comes from, and Latin. It's even before Latin, and that's where Latin and where the Romance languages and the Germanic languages were sort of in one thing a long time ago, and then they broke off over time. So it came from gop, however you pronounce it. I don't know, gop, to give or receive. So that's interesting. This is a new idea that's popping up. It goes way back. Seems like something that's not even related. So we could look at give and receive, right? 'Cause if you give something, I hand it to you, right? Physically, I hand it to you. If I receive something, I take it, you hand it to me. Now I have it, I possess it. Okay, so we can kind of already see, even though these don't seem related at all, we can see how these can connect to hold, to having, okay, having sufficient power or means. The more things that you have, the more resources you have, the more power you have. Oh, look, now we're getting back to, not with that one. We talked about how in the dictionary with can, right, we saw have the ability, power, skill. Interesting. Power or means a dictator can impose as well. So again, it's not that no idea necessarily, but we can start to see how why able is sort of tied with can, even though they're two different things. So this idea of having is very strong under the surface here, especially with able, a little bit with can, but mostly with able. And again, because it comes from that H, haber, to hold, hand, manus, hand. Well, I guess manus doesn't seem like a avere, but we can look at capable really quick. Okay, so again, we're adding able, but what does the cap mean or the cape mean? Sufficiently able, having power or capacity, from French capable, okay, able to hold, interesting, or directly from Latin capabilis, receptive, able to grasp or hold, right? Blah, 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 blah. So we're getting some other ideas that maybe aren't so related to our main focus with can and able, and that's okay. We can just sort of ignore those. Okay, but you see I was gonna say the digger we deep, the deeper we dig, the more that we start to see some other connections that might help us. Some of them are not going to be relevant. Some of them might be. Like we're seeing power a lot. We're seeing having a lot. Okay, and go to the dictionary. We can do capable, having power or ability, efficient, competent. Okay, a capable instructor who is able to instruct well. Okay, so again, it's that idea of not just able, but able to do well. Okay, so not too much special there, but we see capable and able obviously are related. It's sort of a special spin-off of able. If we go back here, okay, so that was the able being added to form words. Blah 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 blah. Okay, Not much else useful there. All right, so we're getting an idea. So we have able, and we're seeing how able is sort of connected to power, have, hand, give and receive are probably in the mix there, but we won't go off into that. What else do we have? Go back. Necessary power, skill, resources. Okay, knowledge here again. So knowledge is kind of tying a little bit into able. Able doesn't really focus too much on knowledge, but obviously if you don't know how to do something, you can't do it, right? So usually you need the knowledge. It's implied, right? Able implies the knowledge, where can is ultimately rooted in the idea of to know itself. Sorry, I keep clicking. I'm trying to click off of my highlight, and I keep clicking this because it just goes all the way across. Anyway, okay, so we can maybe throw in no and put it in brackets because it's kind of related. Okay. So now we're getting sort of a good picture of can, a good picture of able. We can move able over here. Again, we saw how able and possible, right, are kind of related. If we go to could. Now here, if we go to etymology, if we say could, we just have this pretty simple entry that says Old English kutha, or kudha. I don't know if that's a voiced or voiceless th. Past tense of kunan, to be able. Okay, so we saw with can, what was it? Kunan, to know. And then if we go past tense, right, could. In the most basic use of could is the past of can. We know it has other uses. But past tense of kunan, to be able, right? Now so the other way to describe I could do something is I was able to do something. Now there might be a difference in meaning there depending on the context. That's where it gets sort of branches off, but that's what could means in its basic form. It means was able, because it's past tense, right? Okay. Ending changed 14th century to standard English. D, the E eventually got dropped. So it was like kuda, and it just changed to like kuda or whatever, and then the E dropped and it became could. The unetymological L, okay, so this added L, where did this L come from? Because it's silent. We don't say cold or cooled or something, right? It's based on the model of would and should. So would and should were already being spelled with the silent L. And so since this had already changed, right, we dropped the TH one, made it more of a D, and then we dropped the E. Okay, so now instead of CUD, we said, well, we have would and should. Let's just add a silent O in there and a silent L in there so that they all look the same. And that's what happened. That's why this is spelled like these. Now, why are these spelled this way? It doesn't matter. We don't care right now. But that's how could came to be spelled like these. And now they're a nice little modal group, right? So it's unetymological. It's just a historical change that people adapted the spelling rather than it sort of, naturally happening through the root system. So could be as a response to a suggestion. This one I think maybe I didn't mention last time because I didn't think of it. But by 1938, people were saying could be. So if I say, like, I don't know, maybe like I look outside and my car is gone or something, and my friend says, oh, maybe someone stole it. And I say, could be. It's possible. Notice, could be, possible. Okay. So this meaning of could is not past tense. This is another meaning of could that we talked about before, meaning this more hypothetical, right? Like I could go if I had time. That's second conditional. This isn't a conditional, but I say could be, meaning it is possible. So again, we're seeing, even though it's a different form of can, we're seeing this link to possibility. Okay, so that's already kind of in the etymology a bit. But there's not a whole lot here, right? It's not telling us too much. Some interesting points, but not a whole lot of, there's not really anything new here for the most part. So if we go over to the dictionary, we look at the uses of could. we're gonna run out of time. We're gonna have to do a part 2, unfortunately. But, let's see if we can at least, finish up could, and then we can maybe dig a little deeper next time. So a simple past tense of can, which we talked about. So I can swim, I could swim. Now, if I say I could swim when I was a kid, that implies that now I can't. Now I don't know how. I forgot. I'm too old, and my body doesn't work well enough to swim. Whatever the reason is, but if you switch to the past tense, now it sounds like now you can't. Right? Just this basic context, because otherwise you would say can. You still have the ability. You still know how to do that. Right? Okay. Used to express possibility. So as we saw, I wonder who that could be at the door, or that couldn't be true. So that's that idea of possibility, a little more hypothetical, like maybe, I don't know, could exist, could happen. Okay. Used to express conditional possibility or ability. You could do it if you tried. So this is that sort of second conditional, right? It's a conditional possibility or ability. So ability, possibility, they're obviously very closely related. Um, ability related to able sounds like something that you can do, where possibility sounds like something that like you might be able to do, or something that might happen, might be able to happen. So possibility is compared to ability, it sounds a little bit more abstract, a little less real, a little less certain in a way. Um, it's not necessarily fully hypothetical, but if we compare these two directly, ability sounds like more solid, where possibility sounds a little bit more. There's a chance, but I don't know, or who knows, right? Um, but depending on how you phrase things, they could mean pretty much the same thing. But they tend to be used in different structures, different sentences. Used in making polite requests. So we talked about that one before as well. Could you open the door for me, please? So that's that neutral sort of politeness. So we wouldn't use may there to make it extra polite, because may is for permission. If I say like, may you open the door for me? Like, it sounds weird. Um, the more informal form, or less polite form would be can. Can you open the door for me? Sounds a little more direct. Used in asking for permission. So we saw that as well. Could I borrow your pen? May I borrow your pen? It's more formal. Could is neutral politeness. Can I borrow your pen? It's more informal. Used in offering suggestions or advice. Right? You could write and ask for more information. You could at least have called me. So yeah, suggestion and advice, I don't think we touched on too much last time. So we see that one again here. So then for could, right, with can, when we saw can in the dictionary, we see how, okay, this is maybe the core idea, and then to know how to, okay, sure, that's maybe slightly different related to that no core idea, and then have the power, that's kind of up here, have the right qualifications, it's kind of up here. May or have permission, that's maybe a little special. Have possibility, that's maybe a little special. So we have maybe like out of 6 uses, we have like 3 or 4 groups. And we can dive deeper, which we'll do next time, and try to see how these are all tied, right? Which we kind of sort of did in a backwards, loose way as we explored able and possible and blah, blah, blah. So that should kind of already be clear. We just haven't written it down in sort of a map or anything. And then could, we see could is a bit more complicated, because as a simple passive can, okay, that's relatively simple, but then it has this use and this use and this use, and some of these are connected to these, right? If we say may or have permission, can I? It's more direct, more informal. Using asking for permission. So those are directly related. They're just like two different levels of saying the same thing. Where this one is just a simple past, or the regular past tense of can. So those are obviously related between can and could. But then this one, like, um, well, you could do it if you tried. You can do it if you tried. You can do it if you try, not tried. So that'd be first conditional instead of second conditional. So that also works as well. Instead of you will, you can. So we see how this would be, again, it's not a past tense. It's a different use of could, but it can be replaced by can depending on how you're talking about things. So that gets more into the conditionals, and that's a special topic, but we see how that could is related to can. Could is related to can here because it sounds more direct, more informal. So generally, they're kind of still connected. It's just could will maybe make it sound more hypothetical, make it sound maybe more polite, depending on the context, make it into the simple past in that first use. But all these other uses aren't talking about the past tense, right? That's the interesting thing. So this one use of could is sort of the special one, the basic first one that you learn, and then all these other ones are, different applications above the surface, different leaves or branches on the plant. And we know can and could are related because they keep being tied together in most of these cases. So then there's sort of the uses of can that can form into could depending on how you're trying to phrase things. And then so that's not that's sort of a weird case where it's like it's one plant, but it's like two sides of each leaf, sort of a weird thing. Prepositions don't seem to do that. But because can and could are tied together like this, that we seem to get this special effect. You could look at it as there's a can plant and the could plant, and they're just related under the surface, but I think they're really the same plant that gets expressed in two different modes depending on the context, um, for the most part. So gets a little complicated. There was one thing here. What was it? If we do could, maybe it's on my phone because I was looking at my phone earlier. Oh yeah, that's right. So the last thing that I'll touch on today, because we're out of time now, and I have a class in a half hour. Last thing we'll touch on today is when can and able to aren't the same. Okay, and this will help us sort of get a little bit of a clearer picture of the two. So if you say I was able, it's kind of easier to think of these examples in the past tense rather than the present tense. So I'm going to use the past tense example. So I was able to finish the report on time. Okay, we talked about on time in a previous video, on time versus in time. On time just means you're not late. So the report is due by 5 o'clock, no later than 5 o'clock. And then you finished it on time. So it was, maybe before 5 or at the latest, it was 5 o'clock done, right? Not late. So that's what on time means. So I was able to finish the report on time. Now, if I say I could finish the report on time, that can have two possible meanings of could depending on the context, but it does not mean I was able. Okay. So this is a case where it does not work to switch to just use the past tense of can, which is could, or the past tense of to be able, which is was able. If you say I was able to finish the report on time, that means that I managed to do that. I succeeded in doing that. I accomplished that task on time. Okay. So if we look at manage, this is where it gets a little interesting as well. To manage. Okay. 1560s, to handle, train, or direct a horse. It was specifically for horses at the time, but to handle, handle, okay, train, direct. Now obsolete, manage, okay, below. We don't really care about this part, it's just talking about horses. But we see, this is the page I was thinking of. Latin noun manus, hand, from Proto-Indo-European man, which means hand. So the Latin word manus actually came from Proto-Indo-European, and it meant hand. Okay, so even though manage doesn't seem to have any connection to the word hand, we see that right in the etymology, Proto-Indo-European, Latin. We see it in, it was in Italian, it was in Old French, okay, horsemanship. So again, it was specific to horses, but it has this idea of handling, directing, okay. Again, hand, hold. If you have something, if you possess something, you have power, you have control, okay. So that idea is coming up again in this seemingly unrelated word. But when we use able with the meaning of manage to do something rather than can do something or a possibility, now we're seeing the same kind of root system come into play again in a different way, right? It's again, have is very important under the surface here, apparently. The extended sense of control or direct by administrative ability, any sort of business is by 1570. So this is what we usually think of like to manage, right? You have a manager at work, someone above you who gets to tell you what to do. So control, power, right? Because you're managing, you're directing, you have that power to tell people what to do. Okay. Wield a tool or object. This one is weird to me. I don't know what that means, but the meaning effect by effort, succeed in accomplishing. So that's what we mean here. I managed to finish the report. I was able to finish the report. So effect by effort, succeed in accomplishing. I accomplished. We also have a use get by. So I'm managing. Like, oh hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm managing. I'm surviving. I'm not thriving, but you know, life goes on. So I could be better. It's a way to say I could be better, or things could be better. Blah 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 blah. Okay, so a managed economy, we don't care. We don't care about that. But we see here. Okay, this is interesting. We're seeing more connections under the surface for something that we wouldn't even think. So by digging deeper into able, okay, if we just compare able and can, and we say, oh yeah, they can mean the same thing. They can be interchangeable. We completely miss this idea. We have to actually look at able and say, okay, well, what are the uses of able? How can able be used? Is there any differences from can? Oh, look, here's a difference. Here's a different branch. Here's a different root system. That is ultimately, it seems, connected in some way, but it's kind of almost an offshoot. It's a different use of able that we wouldn't even think of can and manage. I mean, I guess you could, like, if you can do something, I guess you can manage to do something. You can manage. They can kind of be used together. There's maybe some sort of loose connection there, but they definitely don't seem connected on the surface. And then if we go to the dictionary really quick, we'll just look at manage. So these are your two primary tools. It's etymology and dictionary. Again, the dictionary, you want to kind of group and break down into simpler groupings because you might have multiple entries that are kind of the same thing. To bring about or succeed in accomplishing, sometimes despite difficulty or hardship. So that's an important idea, despite difficulty or hardship. It's not always there, but if I managed to do something, it might sound like there was a lot of effort. It was difficult to do. So she managed to see the governor. The governor is a busy person, not easy to see, but she managed to do it somehow. How does she manage it all on such a small income? So she doesn't make a lot of money, and yet she has a lot to pay for, and somehow it works. She makes it work. Okay. So this idea of difficulty or hardship, we can maybe see is abstractly connected to possible in a way. That's just an idea off the top of my head. Something is possible. I'm able to do something. I managed to do something. Okay. Despite the difficulty. So something might be possible, but difficult. Right. To take charge or care of, to manage my investments. Okay. So take charge or care, handle, management, control. Right? You're in charge of something, you're caring for something. Again, it doesn't seem directly connected, but those are the implied ideas in these phrases, right? To dominate, obviously power, or influence a person by tact, flattery, or artifice. He manages the child with exemplary skill. So he controls the behavior of the child. To handle, right there, directly handle, direct, govern, control, in action or use. She managed the boat. So she steered the boat and guided it where it needed to go in a very efficient way. So again, that idea is coming up: power, handle, control. To wield a weapon or a tool. Obviously, if you wield a weapon or a tool, it's probably going to be in your hand, right? You're handling the weapon, you're handling the tool, directing it to be used in a certain way. Okay. To handle or train a horse, we see that coming up again. Archaic, to use sparingly or with judgment, as health or money. So if it's archaic, you probably don't have to care. Obviously, that's related in the roots, but if it's not being used that way anymore, we don't really care about it. It could just be an interesting side note. So as a verb, to conduct business, commercial affairs, be in charge, right? Who will manage while the boss is away. To continue to function, progress, or succeed, usually despite hardship or difficulty. To get along, How will he manage with his wife gone? It was a rough time, but we managed. Okay. So that's that idea of getting by, again, that we kind of saw in the etymology. But to continue to function, progress, or succeed. So succeed, right? Progress, moving forward. Not really a related idea that we've seen. But if something has enough power to function, right? Something has enough effort to succeed despite the difficulty. So it's a little bit more abstract. It's maybe a little bit on the side, but we can still see how this kind of relates to manage, can indirectly relate to able. Okay. So this one we don't really care about too much, but we can see how the core ideas are sort of expressing themselves in a similar way. Okay, so let's see. The parents enabled. So that's another one, to enable their son's laziness. There's an I in laziness, not a Y. By, I know lazy is spelled with a Y, but laziness. Usually, if we have something that ends with a Y, like happy, lazy, whatever, when you add the ness, we change it to an I. Might have been a typo, but by doing his homework for him instead of encouraging him to do it himself. Yeah. So that's enable, right? You can actually, we saw how able can be attached to other words to create the ability of doing that noun or verb or whatever as an adjective describing it. But you can also attach things to able, enable, disable, right? Dis means not. So it's not able. Enable means it becomes able, right? It's sort of like turning on a light switch. So to enable their son's laziness, sort of a fancy way to express it, sort of, but perfectly fine language, no problem with it. Everyday use is normal. But to enable someone's laziness, meaning that you are allowing their ability to be lazy. You're not forcing them to not be lazy, right? Can enable. Yeah, I don't know if that's related. Might be, but manage and manjonear sound very similar. Manjonear means to dominate or control someone. Yeah, so manjin. I don't know if that's English. Mangineer. Yeah, not English. It might be. I guess maybe that's Spanish. But yeah, when we look at things between languages, it can always be interesting. But two languages are two languages. Like even if we say gato and we say cat, we say okay, gato is the Spanish word for cat. And 99% of the time there's like, okay, it's just a one-to-one, whatever. But gato is not cat. Gato is oh, it's a different pronunciation, different language system. It has maybe similar connections to English, but it has a completely different, even though it's the same idea being expressed in a different language, it's not the same word. It's two different languages, two different words. And you're going to use gato in certain phrases that we wouldn't. Like when we say it's raining cats and dogs, right? It's raining cats and dogs. You don't say that in Spanish. You say, se está cayendo del cielo. You say the sky is falling, which we also have in English, but that means something completely different. Okay. So you don't necessarily, between languages, although it can be useful, especially if you're coming into a new language, like is the point here. It is useful to look at what you know from your native language or from other languages and be like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, I see this connection. Might be useful, but you don't want to say like, okay, well, oh, this is this. This is like this, but it's not directly this is this. They're two completely different languages, no matter how related they are, no matter how similar. Even Portuguese and Spanish, even though those might be very, very, very close, very similar, or Russian and Ukrainian, very, very close, very, very similar. They're two separate languages. The closer that they are to one language, obviously, the more similar we can say they are. But when you get like Spanish is a Romance language, English is a Germanic language, very heavily influenced by Romance languages. So there's a lot of similarities, a lot of overlap, but the root systems aren't going to match. And the personality of Spanish, the personality of English, they're going to be a little different. They're going to want to express things. They're going to draw certain lines in certain places. And so you don't want to get too comfortable with that. But having this idea, okay, so which in Spanish I would say mangonear. I don't know if it's supposed to be Italian, mangonear. I don't know. It means to dominate and control someone. So yeah, okay. So we can see that same idea expressed in a different language, I guess. In Spanish. Okay. So It has to be go then. Mangonear. That's so weird. I've never heard that. Because there's manejar, right? Which obviously is related to manage. um, but yeah, anyway. Polly's here, awesome. Good. Portuguese manosear is closer to handling something and refers to the act of using someone's hands to manipulate or operate something. Yeah, so again, different lines, different languages. Even if they're similar, even if they're related, they're not the same. It's only used to talk about handling things, not people. Yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna have to go, but we can pick this up in part 2. Hopefully, I mean, even if you have to do it in the comments after or whatever, maybe you can type really quick here before I go. Let me know if this was useful, if this was interesting, because some people might be like, oh yeah, this is all just a bunch of nonsense that doesn't help me learn English. And other people might be like, oh, this is interesting. This helps me remember this. This helps me feel kind of what's going on. That's the whole point. Now you're not going to get it just from, watching me go through this, but hopefully the way I'm explaining things, the way that I'm, showing you these pieces and this information is going to help you actually get a better understanding, because we're looking under the surface at things that may not be so obvious. We can do a part 2 where we do kind of maybe tie these things together a little bit more, get really to that core essence, because we haven't quite gotten to a core essence yet, right? We have some key ideas. We have knowing, power, having, able, right? Which again is sort of like a bridge between know and have, apparently. But power, knowing, those kind of seem to be the core things going on, but maybe there's something even deeper under that. And again, have seems to be playing a big role, or at least what's under have seems to be playing a big role. So there might be this big crazy root system that is ultimately way down here, and it's expressing all the way up in can, it's expressing all the way up in able, it's expressing all the way up in have itself, the different uses of have. So we may have actually, I haven't found something like this. When I was doing the prepositions, it was very clear to me, like, oh, this is one thing, and this is one thing, and this is one thing. And yeah, they kind of connect here, and there's, different phrases and connections to the surface. But this, again, I'm doing this partially live. I haven't actually dug really deep into can yet. And I'm doing that sort of with you guys. And now I'm starting to see there might be an epic root system here that goes way under can and able, that has sort of another layer to it, that's just informing these different concepts. And so that's interesting. It's very, very, very interesting to me, at least. I find it fascinating. So anyway, oh yeah, it was very interesting, to be honest. Like how these words make sense. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes things might not seem to make much sense, but when you dig deeper, you kind of start to, oh, that's why that means that. That's why this is connected to that. At least ideally, that's what you'll find. But yeah, it's just approaching it in a different way, and hopefully helping to build the feeling. Now, to really build the feeling, we'd have to, like, I think maybe some people can kind of pick it up, but in the preposition book, for example, I laid it out. This is a group. This is a group. This is a group. These are all related. Okay, how does that core idea relate to this group? How does that core idea relate to this group? And then we start to see how it's like one branch of the plant. Okay, how does the root create that branch? How does it apply to all those meanings? And then you start to get a feeling like, oh, okay, so it feels like this in space, it feels like this in time, it feels like this in this abstract use, blah, blah, blah. But you keep seeing how it comes back to that core. Where here, because I don't have all that laid out, we're just kind of looking at examples in the dictionary and whatever. You may not be able to build that feeling as strongly, but if we do part 2, maybe we can look at, some more examples of things. And, you can also put that together yourself if you wanted to. I'm mostly concerned here with finding the connections, and digging that up, rather than, like, I'm not writing a book on can here. I probably could. I've, modal verbs, essence of modal verbs or something. But anyway, I'm going to go. We need that tree connecting everything. I know, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you could say that the whole language is, there's a root system, and it's all just one big tree above the surface. But when we want to zoom into a particular, oh, can, or this preposition or that preposition, we have to kind of, zoom in more and see it on a smaller scale. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, each language is kind of like its own full tree, right? Or the way I like to put it, it's like a farm, right? Because you have like all the preposition plants and you have all the modal verb plants and you have, whatever. And then under the surface, we just get bigger and bigger, deeper root systems, right? Like more and more ancient root systems. So anyway, yes. Have a good day as well, Taylor. See you guys later. I have to go. But I gotta schedule more of these lives. I should do that later today. And then we have normal stuff coming up, right? We got some grammar stuff, some pronunciation stuff, some Q&As. Monday is the recording analysis. So make sure to go check last Monday's live to get the sentence at the end of that one. I forgot what it was. And then tomorrow, I think it's probably just going to be a Q&A again. But because I had to move it, it might be a pronunciation. So pronunciation or Q&A, we'll see. But I'll see you guys tomorrow, provided nothing else comes up and stops me from attending. Blah, blah, blah. Bye. You shouldn't have done that, I think. Oh, yeah, that was a sentence. You shouldn't have done that. Yeah, so that's a sentence. If you want to record that, send it to my email. Okay, bye, guys.